Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. We have a tremendous guest, Ken Starr. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mark.
I must confess, we're good friends. You're a good man.
Thank you.
Former,
So are you.
Well, thank you. Former Solicitor General, former federal judge, former independent counsel. And your appearance couldn't be more important right now. So let's jump in. We have independent counsel Robert Mueller. He's got his team. He's actually special counsel. You were independent counsel under a specific statute, and you had obligations under that statute that you had to follow. He has a different statute with fewer obligations. And I wanted to ask you a question, and I've thought about this a lot. As I watch the coverage of Robert Mueller, I find out he's the most noble man to ever walk the earth. And so is his staff. I find members of Congress trying to pass laws to protect him from what I don't know. And I remember when you were an independent counsel, we had the paparazzi media on your front step. I saw you come out with a cup of coffee every now and then. We knew when you came up in the morning, when you went to bed at night. Kind of different coverage. You were criticized constantly by the media. He's defended by the media. What do you make of that?
Night and day, apples and oranges. The press knew where I lived, and they camped out. Also, they camped outside frequently, not always, camped outside our offices in Washington, D.C. Very different.
They don't do that for Mueller. Why is that, do you
It's
think?
very nice of them.
Yes.
And honestly, I was curious. I asked someone in Washington, hey, does people not know where Bob Mueller lives? I don't wish him that kind of invasion of privacy, but we lived in a nice suburban area of McLean, Virginia.
I remember your house. It was very nice.
Yeah, it's simple. Some of my friends
All over TV.
So, our Brady Bunch house.
Yes.
We had a carport, not a garage, and so forth. So, but Madison Court, isn't that a great name? We lived in Madison Court, and the press was pretty much ubiquitous.
But why do you think the distinction, the difference in coverage?
There's got to be a treaty of peace that with the networks, platforms, and so forth, they said, we're going to leave him alone.
They like him. They didn't like you. Do you think it's because of who you were investigating and who he's investigating? I mean, isn't that a logical conclusion?
It's a very logical conclusion. Someone who's investigating the president is likely to be very unpopular with a whole bunch of people, maybe 50%, 45% of the American people. But the media as a whole, even there were some great heroes in the media as far as my own investigation was concerned. But the media as a whole, I think, is pretty sympathetic to those who are investigating a Republican, Watergate, Richard Nixon, and then maybe not so those investigating a Democrat, and especially a very well-liked, controversial though he was, but Bill Clinton was likable, empathetic, charming, and he also was very effective at using surrogates to attack the investigation, whereas President Trump has chosen, I think unwisely, to do the attacks himself.
You and your investigation were attacked relentlessly. Were there any efforts by members of Congress to protect your investigation, to protect your appointment? Were there any sympathetic voices in most of the media? I know there were a few reporters who were actually reporters, but as a whole, it was pretty dastardly, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would say no with respect to members of Congress. There may have been some speeches on the floor from time to time. Then when the going really got rough during the Monica Lewinsky phase of the investigation and the press criticism became extremely intense, I do remember vividly a call from Senator Orrin Hatch saying, Ken, you need to get out there. It wasn't that I was hiding for reasons we've already discussed. You need to get out there. You should do this and you should do that. My friend Ted Olson said, you need to go on Larry King Live. Remember those days? And he just gives you the microphone. You can say what you want to say. But I felt at that time, and I was wrong, I felt at that time that I needed to be much more discreet, careful. There were times when I would go before the media. There were times that we provided public information out of the investigation without running afoul. Here's the key. Don't reveal grand jury information because that's a crime.
I have no idea what Robert Mueller's voice sounds like. He doesn't speak to the public. I don't mean leaking. I'm talking about something else. We don't get many press releases from the special counsel's office. I have my own views of leaks and so forth. But isn't there an obligation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, your office, you at least communicated some information to the American people, given the power of the office and given the reach of the office and given the fact it involves an elected president of the United States and people surrounding him?
I err on the side of providing public information. I think it is an issue of accountability and responsibility. It's nowhere in the statute, right? It's just a judgment call. Are you going to try to educate the public as appropriate without besmirching people's reputations? I think that's one of the key things that we're going to be seeing in the Mueller investigation. One of the things prosecutors should not do is go hammer someone in the public domain. You either present an indictment to the grand jury or you don't.
You know who agrees with you?
Who?
The late Leon Jaworski.
Yeah.
Who was involved in the Watergate matter. Because that was really a new area. And when he came to writing a report, they were somewhat criticized. He said, look, I'm not going to write a report that starts trashing people or insinuating things that I couldn't bring to court or I couldn't prove. That would be a bigger abuse of power than some of these people that I'm investigating. You concur with that?
I completely concur. He wrote the so-called roadmap, but it didn't fill in a whole lot of details because, by definition, it's going to be a one-sided report, right? It's not going to reflect. On the other hand, there's another way of looking at this set of facts or this particular testimony. So I think it is a matter of fundamental fairness that prosecutors who do have this great power should not prosecute by press release or by innuendo and public comments.
Why is that?
It's because of our sense of fairness and justice, life and liberty. You know, we have in this country the baseline of liberty, and your liberty is to a certain extent being the liberty of your reputation. You know, reputation. And if you, the late Vince Foster said, who took his own life, and that was part of our investigation, and just 2 months before he took his own life, he said to the graduates of the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, and I think this makes the point, in our profession, who's a lawyer, in our profession, if you lose your reputation, you lose everything. Well, reputation is just an important period. That's why the law protects reputations from defamation, from libel and slander and the like. It's an important part of our decency as a human being that we don't go besmirching another human being, or if we do, then we might have to face a civil action.
Particularly, it would seem to me, in the criminal context. You're a prosecutor. You have enormous power, particularly a special counsel. I would say has more power than your typical U.S. attorney. And we have a Bill of Rights for a reason. Due process, presumption of innocence. You have a right to cross-examine witnesses. You have a right to see the charges that are going to be brought against you and so forth. In this case, with Robert Mueller, the report that they say is going to be released relatively soon, the president's lawyers haven't seen it. They haven't had an opportunity to respond to anything, to prepare a response to it. It's not vetted through your typical courtroom, and you don't have you don't have discovery, pre-discovery, where depositions and questions. None of that. You have a prosecutor writing a report, whatever that report says, without any checks and balances whatsoever. He's not a judge, and he's not a jury. And yet this statute tried to limit the power of a report, unlike your statute that you worked under and the independent counsel statute. Explain.
Well, the independent counsel statute, which has gone away, it existed for 21 years, was really putting a pretty heavy thumb on the scales toward impeachment. Remember, it was passed in the wake of Watergate, so the country had been through an impeachment process. The president resigned. So what do we want this special prosecutor, whatever we call him, independent counsel, special counsel, what do we want that person to do? Well, we want that person not just to make prosecutorial decisions. We want the person to write a report. And we want the person to send that report to the House of Representatives. It's one of the reasons, Mark, that Justice Antonin Scalia, in his magnificent dissent the case that upheld the constitutionality of the independent counsel statute, said this statute is, he used these great terms, acrid with the smell of impeachment. That's been improved. Under the regulations under which Bob Mueller was appointed, there is a reporting requirement, but it is a confidential report under these regulations to go to the Attorney General. Then the Attorney General is to give a report, not to say, oh, here's the Bob Mueller report. So the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, is going to have to make a judgment. What am I, as Attorney General, going to report up to Congress?
So it's really a completely different reporting requirement.
Completely.
And yet people talk about this as the impeachment report. Is it because of things that Nancy Pelosi and Gerald Nadler have said, that we want to see this report before we make decisions about impeachment, which they know they don't even have a right to see this report?
I think there's a failure to understand, to drill into the regulations under which Mueller was appointed. Now, the regulations could be jettisoned, right? They said, okay, we're not going to use those regulations anymore. But those regulations have been in effect in both Republican and Democrat administrations. They came into being in the Clinton administration. So they sort of stood the test of time.
20 years, you said they've been there.
They have been around for a while. And so I don't know how many special counsels have been appointed. But the point is, those regulations have been there on the books for Congress to look at. And if Congress had come to the judgment that it liked the old system of a full report to the Congress of the United States, it should have stepped in long before now. I think there's an assumption that isn't grounded in the text of the regulations.
When we come back, I want to discuss with you these recent revelations by Andrew McCabe and others, what's been going on at the FBI. You worked at the Justice Department. I worked at the Justice Department. You were Solicitor General at the Justice Department. I was Chief of Staff at the Justice Department. This FBI situation is very, very troubling, and I want to pursue that with you in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, you can join us on Levin TV. That's Levin TV by going to blazetv.com/mark to sign up. We'd love to have you. blazetv.com/mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV. That's 844-LEVIN-TV. We'll be right back.